Hello, one and all, and welcome back to another episode of Roll Insight, Battle of the Bands. I am Joshua MacGregor, and this is a sort of talkback podcast style discussion thing where I go through the series that we do here on the Hidden Realms YouTube channel. And today I want to be talking about the last five episodes of the reserve list campaign, as well as doing kind of a campaign wrap up and talking about where this fits into the overall narrative of Saigalia, which is the fictional setting in which all of this takes place. So we have a gimmick here on Roll Insight, which is that every time I roll a die to see how much insight you're going to get. It doesn't usually matter a huge amount. It usually gets very low indeed. But today, we got a 17, and 17 is a pretty good insight check, especially if you are wisdom-based. So we are going to go ahead and just give you a bunch of info about... I am going to give you a bunch of info about all this stuff. So without further ado, let's get into it. We are discussing more specifically episodes 22 through 26, which sort of wrap up the campaign, bring everything to a close. And then we'll talk a little bit, as I said just now, about the wider context of this whole thing, what the impetus was for it, how it sort of developed and grew into what it ended up being, and what the plan is going forward on the channel. So the reserve list, also spoilers for the reserve list campaign, the totality of it, possibly for Mockeries as well. If you have not seen it yet, I suggest you do that before you watch this. So the reserve list, episode 22, called Gods of Aruhan. If I'm not mistaken, and I very well might be, this is the episode where the band, the reserve list, raids the Guresh estate. The Gureshes, of course, have been one of the central villains throughout the campaign. They showed up a little while back trying to get some blink dog puppies, not so good, and have returned in Menacil, doing something nefarious bad. We saw them because when Joe joined, that's right, we saw them in the warehouse fight where the band took them by surprise and almost foiled their plans right there. They did indeed have more blink dog puppies there. It turns out that there were two groups that went and tried to find them, the reason for which we'll get to in a minute. The Gods of Aruhan are a triumvirate of classic D&D gods, and in the setting of Saigalia, there are sort of 8 worlds, each with 3 deities, not necessarily ones that were paired together in the original Great Wheel of Cosmology, but ones that I thought fit together fairly well and create a simplified Great Wheel Cosmology for Saigalia. Yeah, so in Aruhan, it's sort of a rich southern human kingdom. They worship Bane, the god of tyranny, Leviatar, the goddess of pain, and Merkul, the god of death. And of course, they see these gods in a much more positive light, in a much more in a light which benefits them and their society much more than people on the outside looking in going, oh, a slaving nation, that's not good, and their god is about tyranny, and their goddess is about pain, and Merkul is the reaper who comes and collects souls. They of course see these gods in a much more positive light. Bane being a god of order, societal order, and individual purpose within that order, etc., autocratic sort of rhetoric, if you will. Leviatar, goddess of trials and of knowing oneself and mastery of oneself through pain, and etc. And Merkul being a very neutral, unbiased force that filters the souls of the living to the world of the dead. So they raid the Guresh estate, and solve little puzzles here and there, and managed, with the help of some ranger skills and some animal companion stuff, to find their way down into the underbelly of this estate, triggering and avoiding some traps devoted to the various gods down there, and rescuing a very particular dark elf named Salen Larfendil. Named is perhaps the wrong term. They have taken this and repurposed this almost slur, meaning one whose name is known in Elvish as it's a slave name, has taken that and repurposed it, and that is the name that they reclaimed for themselves. Very weak, very much abused and battered, and left behind when Aruhani left. When Rhaegar, I believe is his name, the villain, took all of his people and ran through these underground passages to locations unknown. They save this particular dark elf, Salen, who's more than happy to help them. And a little tidbit, this is where the insight starts to come in here. This particular dark elf references the battle against Lolth, and that being a thing in dark elven history in the course of this world. In the year 450 of this world, so like 225 years ago, from the present day, Lolth took possession of a woman and tried to manifest herself into the real world, into the mortal world rather, to try to take over, and everybody got together to fight her. And a pair of heroes, Owen and Poultice, were at the forefront of that fight against her and managed to slay her, meaning that there is no Lolth any longer in this setting. She has been killed. And since then, the Dark Elves have not been under her influence and have had much better time. But the problem with everybody getting together from around the world to fight Lolth means that the Aruhani armies came and took a lot of slaves when they invaded. It was not a pretty invasion. It was not all good, stopping Lolth. And the ramifications of that carry on. And this woman was one of the Dark Elves who were there, and one of the ones who actually helped, who was a priestess of Lolth and helped Lolth come to power. Her original name is Nerys Withrathin, and something that is to be revealed later down the line is that Nerys Withrathin was not just any priestess of Lolth. She was the possessed priestess of Lolth, the high priestess of Lolth, who was possessed by Lolth and therefore consumed and sent into the abyss, the demon web pits. Then Lolth was killed. The Aruhani wanted the ability to manifest gods, and so they did an operation and sent people into the abyss to take her soul, made a new body, and kind of stuffed her soul into it because she was unwilling to come back from a true resurrection or something like that. She was not willing to come back, and so they brought her, they took her, they tortured her, got as much information from her as they could, discovered that it was a very unique set of circumstances that allowed Lolth to be manifest, which they could not recreate. And then she was just kept as a slave, and generations passed, and people forgot who she was originally, and she ended up in the Guresh estate in Garendia, in Menacil. And so she is released, and it's a very fun thing for me as a DM to put these characters with a deep historical lore in the world in the way of characters who might not know who they are. Because essentially what happens here is this person who has gone through an enormous amount and been reformed to a great degree, who very disillusioned with Lolth, who is a very abusive, very tyrannical figure to her personally and to her people, in many ways very reformed, but in many ways in fact was emphatically a villain, a big bad evil guy, Gal even, who was worthy of her own campaign, and in fact got her own campaign as the big bad evil guy. She is now released back into the world. She is 225 years older, et cetera, et cetera. And with all of these changes, but now there is another element to play with going forward in the world, which is something very fun for me to kind of pepper in and sort of reveal to my players. Is like, hey, sort of in private discussions like this role insight thing, is like that person that you saved and who was very pleasant to you and very grateful to have been saved from a life of slavery has all of this history behind them, and it's not about punishing good deeds, it's about richness of world, and you never know exactly what the story is behind anybody in particular. So that was really fun for me to plant that person there for them to interact with, and a very simple interaction in any other campaign. That is a stock character who just tells them some hints as to how to proceed forward. It gets rescued and then disappears into the background of the story. But those are the characters that I love giving a little bit of extra stuff to. So fun. Moving right along to the next episode 23, Tyranny, Pain, Death. Of course, names for the gods, which I established earlier. Here we get the fight with Rhaegar. And this fight was designed to be hard. It was designed to be brutal. What I found was I ended up making a few decisions because I wanted him to feel badass that undercut a few of the decisions made by players. I wasn't super happy with that in myself, and that's something for me to get better at as a DM. There were a couple of things that people did that I sort of arranged in the background to have less of an effect, or not quite to do as much. That's not cool. That wasn't cool. But generally speaking, the fight did have the impact that I wanted it to. Rhaegar is this very, very powerful priest of Bane specifically, but of all of these three gods on the world of Pandemonium where they come from, and did some really big flashy magic, and ended up killing the badger companion of Joe, our new player who joined us late in the campaign. I felt really bad about. First off, Julian's character Tombar dropped almost immediately, which was very funny when he got back up and immediately dealt the killing blow with, like, I think it was like a ball of acid. Julian is on a particular trajectory with this character, which is fantastic to see, where he's just kind of like devil may care, and everything kind of worked out for him, and it has been this entire time. And here's a great example of why. I kind of expected the things to get pretty dire in this fight, and they did in a way. I think for a lot of the players who were sort of newer, this was a challenge that they hadn't necessarily experienced before. Very high level caster doing very crazy things, and a bunch of effects that they hadn't seen before, area of effect pain spells and blood manipulation magic and stuff like that, which was all designed to be very scary. And to come out the other end with a permanent death, but not a permanent character death, felt very felt appropriate for the moment, for the fight. This Rhaegar was obviously the story sort of adapts to the players, but I knew at this point that we were getting near the end of the story, and I wanted to begin wrapping up plot lines in a not an ideal world, but in a different one where time is unlimited, and this isn't a bi-weekly series that we do. Just and a little bit more time could have been given to it. I think Rhaegar leaves behind a lieutenant or something and makes it to the final fight in the last episode, and he and Brendan Legacy are in that final fight together. because that would have been crazy. That would have been crazy. But and he would have been toned down if that had been the case. But he, knowing what I knew and seeing that as they were like chasing after him, I felt this is a good place to deal with the biggest member of the Guresh family and have the Gureshes just kind of be organizationally a threat, especially since we still have Edgar Galanis, who can technically be the bigger threat here for the Gureshes. So there are a lot of things that went into why this guy was here and why he was such a big threat. But the players took him down, as they do. When you've got 6 players, they tend to mess your stuff up. Not a huge amount to say else about this episode right off the bat. So let's move right along. The next episode is 24, Summerview Dreams. This is the episode directly after that fight, sort of recovering from their wounds and mourning Bodger, and then continuing to chase after Edgar Galanis, who Master Ulani had gone up after as well. And so they go up, and there's a bit of detective work to discover that they are in fact in the lower floors of a hotel. And then they meet this other character, Semitir Fazim, who runs the hotel. We learn a little bit about Semitir. He's a former Aruhani slave, and he's been sort of like working with the Aruhani in that way of, I'm preparing to mess with these guys in a real and fundamental way. One might notice a little bit of insight here that Semitir Fazim gets a particular reaction out of Alberta in this episode when he shows up. The reason for that is, and for those keen-eyed viewers who have seen everything on our channel, thank you so much for watching. In Watson and Thanos' Magnificent Heist, which is a prequel one-shot to our first campaign that we did here on the channel, Semitir Fazim was a butler of that particular noble's house in Garanseal, in the center of Garandia, and we sort of like lost contact with where he went. He in fact went here. He went to Menacil and started running the Summerview Hotel. However, again, this is like the insight part. That's the bit that people would know about. Semitir Fazim has shown up in other situations as well in this world. He's sort of an omnipresent character. The reason for which, do I spoil it? The reason for which, there's a lot more going on with this person than there appears to be, and he works for an organization which is a very shadowy sort of conspiracy theory, Illuminati, not Illuminati style, but a very, very powerful shadow organization who have their tendrils in everything. And so he shows up in a lot of contexts with a lot of information over the course of some campaigns and stuff, and some things that weren't recorded as well. So that's kind of fun. That character's got a lot of history, got a lot of motivation stuff, layered motivation behind them, and helps in this situation. I believe this is where I kind of jammed in my Dragonborn Dreamer lady. She was meant to be a bigger part of this story and explain a lot of this stuff earlier. But the players sort of had a checklist of things to do in the city and never got around to going to the Dreamers Lounge and talking to her, which is absolutely fine. Again, we started to move toward the end of the show in the last 6 episodes. So she shows up here and kind of explains some stuff and allows them to go to the Dreaming, which is a fun little pre-finale set piece, which I wish I had done more with. Going into episode 25, The Silver Sword, I wish I had done more with the setting of the Dreaming than what we did get. And I look forward to doing more in the future, and allowing that to live up to the potential that I know it has, as this sort of like parallel world of creation and imagination and whimsy, with people sort of being able to come here via dreamers and people like that. So that is, it's almost the equivalent of the Feywild, but like turned up to 11. And I wanted to make that place and establish that place, and as I had the nightmare in this campaign, and I wanted to give it at least a little bit of a cameo again, because there are things that were going to be explored, and kind of at least touch on them. So yes, the Silver Sword. This is the episode where famously or infamously Tombar cuts his own silver thread. It's also our penultimate episode where they go around and they learn a little bit more about Nausicaa, the nature of that there, which is that it is a place where nightmare and dreaming just kind of pile into the real world, and it's a continent that is very difficult to enter and to conquer. Very, very deadly indeed. It's okay. So insight time. It is the site of what I am calling a possibility storm, which is where the normal rules of the universe break down a little bit. Colors become numbers, up becomes down, etc., etc. Things get wiggy and weird, and states of matter are interchangeable, and it all gets wiggy. The thing about the possibility storm is, because it warps space, it also exists as like a space storm, and kind of like a Bermuda Triangle situation where certain spaceships, because spaceships that pass through it kind of wind up crashing near Nausicaa, which is a little bit of a spoiler for the origin of Tombar's Silver Sword. But the point is, in this campaign, is what it does. And what it does is it can separate somebody's dreaming consciousness from their body. And he learns this, and he learns this, and he cuts his own tether, and it's incredible. It's one of the best things, I think. One of the best character moments of anything ever, like of any campaign that I've ever run, and fits so well with this character, and leads to such an incredible sort of revelation in him in this episode and in the finale, that he has been sort of dreaming his way through his life, that he's had rose-tinted glasses on, and realizes that he's fucked up, that he's really fucked up, and should be a little bit more cautious, just a little bit, which I thought was perfect for Tombar's character, and wonderful work by Julian, doing that, putting that in there. Yes, and then we see the eyes on Edgar Berlanus. And then, of course, we get into the finale. Now, the finale is a big, fun fight. I wanted to put some more stuff in there. Master Lonnie was sort of asleep in a closet. They never really found her, but there was always a potential for them to find her and bring her into the fight, which would have progressed things more in their favor. Brandon Lagasse was meant to do more, I think, than he ended up doing. He ended up being a big threat and a big presence, especially in the Nightmare at the end there, when I was course correcting for him a little bit. My instinct was to not do too much with him at the beginning, just because Lady Axa was alone with him up there with a bunch of enemies surrounding her, and the rest of the party needed to get closer and weren't getting closer. Which is an interesting mix of party members. We've got rogues, and we've got wizards, and we've got rangers, long-ranged fighters. to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, there's no reason for people to want to go up physically further because everybody can fight at range, and or is squishy. It doesn't want to get in the main fight. So um, yeah, bad level design for me a little bit. Um, Also, I want to shout out Owlbear Rodeo, which is what we use for all of our online maps and hosting and stuff like that. It's a very intuitive, lovely little platform. We started using it late in the campaigns in both Reserve List and Mockeries, but I really love it. I think it works really well, and I think for the purposes of combat, yeah, I think it works great. I 2 thumbs up. I suggest using Owlbear Rodeo, and I know there are like more involved and interesting ones like Tailspire, and there are more features technically on Roll20. Although I don't like Roll20. It's too unintuitive. This isn't a review of online map things, but I just wanted to say that. Yes, and moments of prophecy come to pass. We get the reveal last episode of Lidiox having her another half of herself that exists in the nightmare and becoming that properly for the first time. We get to see some of her badassery in the finale. With Gwen, of course, we've got all of her stuff with her father, who of course turns out to be a good guy who has been setting up the Aruhani to fail, and to fail very spectacularly. It's worth actually getting into this a little bit more. I'm just going to talk about that for a minute, because that was something that I never managed to figure out a way to introduce organically. The stakes of the Aruhani invading Gorendia, and the stakes of what would happen if the Aruhani were caught, which is the whole plan that Edgar Galanis had at the end there, which I didn't want it to feel very like a Deus Ex Machina. Like I didn't want it to feel, it would have been prepared for a long time. And it's difficult when you're running a game that has a very limited time. Like we were doing it once every 2 weeks, and for 3 hours max. We ended up being like 2 hours and 20 minutes when you cut out break time and beginning, like getting people online and chatting and stuff. So it's a short amount of time to be telling the story in, and I needed the story to be coming to an end. And all of this political stuff about Aruhan and Gorendia is very fun for me, not necessarily fun for people who just want to come and have a good time and kill some bad guys and solve some puzzles, do some role play, etc. So the whole idea is that the threat appears to be that Aruhan is going to invade Gorendia. Of course, they're not invading Gorendia. They actually just want to go through Gorendia around the border, which is so deadlocked between them and Verano, so that they can kind of come at them. This is the border, and this is Aruhan. They want to go like this into Verano and take the capital and take that country. Finally ending like a 700-year war between the two nations. The reason this involves our heroes in any way is because they have to neutralize the border threat of Gorendia, which it appears in the form of the general in Sierra Alunez. And so the Gureshas have been tasked with neutralizing the city, while Edgar has sort of drawn the attention away from the Gorendian nobles and military to allow them to sneak around. That's the idea. Whew. And then, of course, there is a treaty which keeps Gorendia safe, which is that it's a mercantile nation. It survives because everybody knows that controlling Gorendia sets up whoever does that to conquer everywhere else. And that can't be allowed to happen. And so a coalition army at the end of this campaign is put together from all of the other nations and Aruhan is invaded, and their government is dismantled, and uh, their sort of army is they would have taken prisoners. They would have, definitely said surrender. But if they fought, they would have, fought a war against many battles against the Aruhani here. Overwhelming force to depose the kings and queens of Aruhan, take those people as political prisoners. Things get really bad in Aruhan after this. Edgar Galanis should not be necessarily considered a wholesale hero for Toronto, but like the societal upheaval that he has implemented in the name of freedom and freedom for slaves, and the end of this horrible, messed up kingdom and nation, which is so corrupt and so evil, for lack of a better word. That's something that he has been working towards this entire time. And so those are the full weight of the stakes in the finale here, is that is the victory that Edgar Galanis gets, and which the party, and especially Gwen, by trusting him and allowing him to do what he needed to do, and delivering a message for him, enabled to happen. So that's what happened there. Of course, we got Isabin with her aunt's armor and hammer, which was very badass and fun. I was really glad to give those to Miranda. Joe getting in some fun raging and new snake companion kills, and Ralph with Nurgle transforming people and destroying things, and having an overall blast. And of course, Lydia being a nightmare queen and being absolutely awesome, and ultimately succeeding against Brandon Lagasse. The last thing we got to talk about, of course, is the death of Tombar Jolly Snorkel. Tombar doesn't make it in the finale here. However, we left things purposefully open. I wanted to leave things purposefully open, because death isn't the end in Saigalia. This isn't the end in this world. And Tombar would have made it to hell, and would have made it to hell with his crew. And there is a potential for him to come back, because resurrection is a thing, as we have established in this world, in this campaign already, in Crosshair. Having him actually die here felt appropriate to the stakes of a finale at the end of a campaign. It felt appropriate after the cutting of his own cord, and it helped raise the stakes. I think it helped Julian feel that character development for Tombar more deeply. And I think it allowed everybody to feel the stakes more deeply. I think it was kind of perfect. I think it was kind of perfect that he almost made it back. Of course, he could have made it all the way, but he almost made it back. Not quite. There are a lot of moments in the finale that I am very proud of, that I'm very happy for my players to have had overall. So let's move into the sort of like overall for the campaign and how it progressed, where it fits into the overall world. The reserve list started off as a fun sort of idea that there would be 2 campaigns, one run by me and one run by Neil. Shout out to Neil Hara, one of the best DMs and players of all fucking time, who also appears on the channel intermittently and is fantastic and wonderful. Neil it may or not be in a very big project that's coming up next in the channel. Yes, so Neil had his band, The Narcissistic Tendencies, and I had my band, The Reserve List, and we were gonna have consecutive sort of episodes and ongoing campaigns. And then things got really busy for Neil, just in life, like really, really busy. He has all kinds of stuff going on, fantastic things for him in his business and personal life, which meant that he couldn't continue with Narcissistic Tendencies. And I had another group of friends, some from uni and a more recent artistic friend in Callum, who I wanted to run D&D with, and that ended up being the mock race. And so I've run two lengthy campaigns with both of them going on. Now, this means, as well as this other project that's been going on in the background, I at a time was running 3 campaigns at a time, and that was a lot. There was a lot of writing. It was a lot of work. Really good, but really difficult to fit in other things in life. And my one sort of things if I were to do this again, the things I would do differently are that I would have wished to have had more time per session. Having very short session times made it really hard to relinquish DM control and railroading, and I really felt like I was pushing the story forward, if not on railroad tracks, then just taking the players and just kind of like moving them forward. I would have loved to have given more agency to them. Would have loved to have made it a little bit more of a safe and relaxed space for new players. That's the other thing is teaching new players online is a lot harder than teaching new players in person. A lot harder, and that's something that I feel we could have gotten down. Like we could have gotten Miranda and Julian, I think, much more comfortable with the rules and stuff had we been in the same room. But that is neither here nor there. Yeah, and I think I would have liked to have given them a little bit more time to explore everything at their own pace, and gotten a little bit more juicy character interaction and stuff about them in the story, and not just touching on the plot beats of what I had prepared. I think I'm very proud of it overall. I think everybody did amazingly. I think the character moments they all had were fantastic, and I'm very, very impressed with new players, Miranda and Julian, and newer players in Hugo and Joe. I think everybody was fantastic, and very, very fun to do this campaign and to flesh out parts of the world that hadn't been fleshed out until this point. Yeah, so speaking of which, this campaign takes place 4 years after the God Heist, which is the first sort of season that we did on the channel. Yeah, 4 years after that, and the end of it occurs at a point 8 months prior to the next big campaign that is going to go on the channel. That will be coming a little bit later on. There's some work that needs to be done on it all before it can go up. So let's talk a little bit, let's talk just briefly about what happens next on the channel for the next few weeks. Obviously, this week is Roll Insight. Next week will be Roll Insight, but for the Mockeries campaign wrap up. Then in the weeks after, we have 2 one-shots for you all. We've got a one-shot set on Vulpikar, and we have a one-shot featuring Tombar Jolly Snorkel in Hell. I think for everybody who watched the reserve list and and who's invested in Tombar's character, I think you will be very, very pleased with that one shot, and I very much look forward to you guys seeing it. It was a lot of fun to run, and sets things up nicely for the Battle of the Bands, which is coming. The Battle of the Bands will be coming after those one shots air. So we'll be doing this week and next week as Roll Insights, the next 2 weeks afterwards as one shots, the week after that as the Battle of the Bands, finally, hopefully with Narcissistic Tendencies, but if not, with the Mockeries and the Reserve List, at least part of those crews for sure. And that should be a lot of fun. We will get a canonical winner. So that's really good. And then there are more things in the works. There are projects that I've wanted to do for a long time. There are projects that others on the channel have wanted to post for a little bit. I know that I have been wanting to do a campaign summary of the God Heist, and by extension, I will want to do one for the Reserve List and one for the Mockeries as well. It's just a matter of finding time to write those out and record them, edit them, and put them up. So we'll see how that goes. And then, of course, there is this next campaign, which I cannot wait to share with you all, but of course needs just a little bit more work before we can do that. And in the meantime, I'm sure there will be lots more one-shots and content from people as we sort of transition into the next phase of what we're doing here on the channel, which is I'm finding very exciting. I'm looking forward to it a lot. I hope you all enjoy. So without further ado, I'm sure I've talked your ear off long enough. This has been Roll Insight for the Reserve List campaign. Tune in next time for a Roll Insight for the Mockeries, and talk to you then. Bye.